You can see the headlines, can't you? Local deputy captured Johnny Rocco. Your picture would be in all the papers. You might even get to tell on the newsreel how you pulled it off. Yeah. Well, listen, Hick. I was too much for any big city police force to handle. They tried, but they couldn't.
Key Largo from 1948 was an excellent crime film, directed by John Huston and starring Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, and Edward G. Robinson, as well as a number of other big names. The story takes place on the little island of Key Largo in South Florida, in a hotel with a bunch of shady criminal characters, right as a hurricane is about to arrive. And I love this film. I've seen it a bunch of times, and it's not just because I'm a Bogart fan, but for a whole bunch of reasons that I'll get into with this review. I'll give an overview of the movie and then wrap up with some closing thoughts. Well, the film opens up, and the story is set on Key Largo, a remote island. It's off the coast of Florida. The character Major Frank McCloud, played by Humphrey Bogart, is going to visit the family of one of his GI buddies who was killed in World War II. Now, as he arrives, right away, we can tell something fishy is going on. He gets a cool reception from some of these guys that are hanging around at the bar. Only one who is initially nice to Frank is the character of Gay, who's played by actress Claire Trevor. I've seen in a bunch of other movies, and she's there. She's totally drunk, but she's the only one who is initially kind to him. These rough characters around the bar are Curly, who's played by actor Thomas Gomez, who looks a lot different than how he looked in the movie Ride the Pink Horse, which I reviewed recently. There's the character Toots, who's this tough guy played by Harry Lewis, Ralph, actor William Haid, and Angel, played by actor Dan Seymour, who was also in the film To Have and Have Not that I reviewed recently. Anyhow, these are the bunch of thugs that give Frank a cold reception, but they claim they're just there for the fishing and the keys, but we, the viewer, we know better. Frank meets with the widow of his friend, Nora Temple, played here by Lauren Bacall, and his father, James Lionel Barrymore, who's this older man in a wheelchair who owns the hotel. Now, because the winter vacation season is over and a hurricane is on the way, the only ones staying at this hotel are the suspicious characters Frank met earlier. So they're preparing the house for the hurricane when Sheriff Ben Wade arrives, played by actor Monty Blue, and his deputy, and they basically mention they're looking for the Osceola brothers, who are a pair of fugitive American Indians. Now, these two are only a brief subplot of the film, but it is noteworthy that while watching this film last week with my dad, he pointed out that one of the brothers was played by actor Jay Silverheels, who was also known for playing Tonto in the Lone Ranger program. I only point that out because it's usually I'm the one who's pointing out obscure actors from a film, and my dad beat me to the punch this time by pointing out that actor. Anyhow, as the storm gets closer, the bad guys pull out their guns, and they take Frank, Nora, and James hostage. And it's here that we finally meet the leader of these bad guys. This is notorious gangster Johnny Rocco. He's played amazingly here by actor Edward G. Robinson. We find out that he's entered the country illegally from Cuba to make a delivery of counterfeit money. But because of the storm, his contact has been delayed. So they're just hanging out at this house and waiting. Well, the thugs discover this Deputy Sawyer, actor John Rodney, who's been snooping around outside. They find him and they grab him, and there's a tense standoff that ends with Rocco shooting Sawyer. And Rocco's guys then take his body out to just dump it out at sea before the storm. So we can see right away this Johnny Rocco guy means business. But Frank seems to be cautiously biding his time at this point. He's not ready to jump into action just yet. The storm moves in, and as it pounds the house, everyone is trapped. And note, the power gets knocked out. So as we're watching the film, the house is filled with, strong, shadowy contrast. And it just gives you an uncomfortable feeling of dread. And heat, too. I mean, this is South Florida, after all. And we get to the infamous scene where Rocco forces Gay, his female companion, to sing for everyone. Now, she's an alcoholic and just badly wants a drink. Rocco agrees. He'll give her a drink if she sings. And What follows is an amazing but uncomfortable song, as she just sings on the spot with these ironic lyrics about, "My man, I love him so, even though he's mean to me." And watch the scene and watch everybody's faces as they just watch kind of anxiously this performance take place. She finishes, and Rocco just puts her down and insults and refuses to give her a drink. But it's here that Frank finally steps up, pours her a drink, and gives it to her, followed by Rocco giving him a series of slaps to the face. While they all wait for the storm to pass, there's wind and there's rain, and a tree crashes through a window. As it finally slows, James Temple offers Frank their home to stay at. And it's a sweet scene, as he's given an opportunity to maybe put his life back together again, start with a new family, and we see him looking at Nora, quietly considering this offer. It's a neat scene in the film. Rocco, though, at this point discovers that his boat is gone, washed away from the storm. Well, the sheriff returns, looking for his deputy at this point, and everyone at the house, basically, they're quiet about what happened to him. But the sheriff does find the deputy's body washed up outside. He asks Rocco who did it, and cold as ice, Rocco blames it on the Osceola brothers. So Wade confronts and kills them both, and then leaves with Sawyer's body. So Rocco's contact, Ziggy, finally arrives. It's played by character actor Mark Lawrence, who I've seen in several films before, like The Asphalt Jungle. He's there to buy this large amount of counterfeit money from Rocco. After this, Rocco forces Frank to take him and his gang back to Cuba on the small boat that's at the hotel. And just before he leaves, though, Gay secretly steals Rocco's gun and gives it to Frank. And as he and these bad guys are all getting on this boat to make this trip, and with not much of the film left, I'll leave the review here so you can go see the exciting ending for yourself if you've never seen this film before. So some closing thoughts. Key Largo was produced by Warner Brothers and directed by legendary director John Huston, who also co-wrote the screenplay. I'm really growing to appreciate the films of John Huston as I review more of them on this channel. And his work here on Key Largo is no exception. The feeling here, almost from the beginning, is one of paranoia and dread. Right as Bogart's character arrives at the hotel and initially meets these shady characters, we know this isn't a safe place. And I love how the direction of this film is largely restricted to shadowy, confined locations in this house. It leaves you feeling hot, confined, and claustrophobic. And I'm seeing how well John Huston handles physically uncomfortable environments in films. This film or films like African Queen or Treasure of Sierra Madre. These are films that kind of give you a visceral feeling of discomfort. And I like that. The film was adapted from a play by playwright Maxwell Anderson. And honestly, the film has a theatrical feel, like you're watching a play almost, especially as the setting is confined mostly to the interior of the small house, as I mentioned. And even the outdoor areas of the film, these were just constructed on a Hollywood set. And I didn't find that distracting at all. If anything is mentioned, it's like you're watching a play. I've noted in some previous reviews, such as Ride the Pink Horse, that one of the themes I'm growing to appreciate from some of these late 1940s movies is the character of the jaded World War II veteran. He's coming back from the war and struggling to find his place and a direction to go, often with a cynical outlook. And Bogart really nails that element with his character here. We don't really see him as like a spring into action movie hero necessarily, but he's a little bit more subdued here, a character who just bides his time quietly, watching and waiting and calculating what steps to take next. I like that. It's a little different from other roles I've seen him in. In any case, I thought Bogart was great in this movie, and oh well, heck, I've enjoyed him in everything, even Return of Dr. X. You can't go wrong with Humphrey Bogart. I thought that Lauren Bacall was excellent in this film as well. And what I liked about this film is how different she was from other films I've seen her in, like The Big Sleep, where she's not necessarily the sultry, seductive woman, but here she's more of just a quiet woman who's concerned about caring for her father-in-law, who does seem to show a passive interest in Bogart's character that gradually grows through the film, but it's not really like a fiery romance or anything like some of the other films they've been in. I actually really like their interactions throughout this film, and it made for a good ending to what would be ultimately their fourth and final film together. And of course, Edward G. Robinson is amazing as the crime boss here. I think he's just an awesome actor, and he's completely in his element as the scheming, controlling, cigar-chomping bad guy. And he plays off Bogart's character very nicely. And I also like how we see that he's not above being a little jumpy with the storm that's rolling around outside of the house, too. I thought that was great. And I thought Lionel Barrymore was noteworthy as the old father, who you can see is really struggling with that sense of powerlessness with these criminal characters who have just invaded his home. It was interesting, in researching the film, I was listening to Eddie Mueller's review, and he makes mention of that interesting scene in the film where we see Barrymore's character briefly rise from his chair to confront the thugs. As Mueller explains it, since the late 1930s, Barrymore had a hip injury that had left him confined to a wheelchair. So in the context of like the 1940s movie audiences who would have been watching this, they were familiar with him being seated in the chair for most of his roles. So it would have been something of a shock to see this scene of him rising up from his chair. It's also noteworthy that this film had an amazing score by Max Steiner. You really can appreciate it during some of those tense moments of the film. And a final note about Claire Trevor's song in this film. From a couple different sources I was reading, John Huston didn't tell Claire Trevor about when she was going to perform her song solo until the very day that it was filmed. Now, she wasn't a trained singer and hadn't rehearsed the song at all. So what you see and hear in the film, that kind of uncomfortable, unrehearsed, nervous rendition, with a real sense of anxiety, this was the first take that they used. And it just works perfectly in the film. It's an amazing scene that if you've never seen Key Largo, at the very least, go research and find this one moment of the film. And she won an Oscar for her performance in Key Largo. Anyhow, that's my thoughts on Key Largo from 1948. It's an excellent crime film directed by John Huston, starring Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, and Edward G. Robinson. It's an amazing film and one worth checking out.